There was a time when Hollywood could take us somewhere completely different. And I'm not just talking about a different location. I'm talking about different worlds, different customs, different beliefs, different dangers, different expectations about what a person owed their family, their God, their king, whatever. But you could sit down and spend 2, 3, or more hours with them, sometimes in ancient Egypt, in the Scottish Highlands, in the deserts of Arabia, the American frontier, these things that were centuries away from our own lives in the present. But those people never felt that far away. We recognized them. We recognized their love, their pride, their grief. We understood what they lived and died for. And that was Ben-Hur. That was Lawrence of Arabia. That was the Ten Commandments. That was Braveheart. That was Gladiator. Spectacle films for sure, but spectacle was never really the point of those films. The point of those films was to make the past feel alive without pretending it was just some earlier, dumber, less sophisticated, less knowledgeable version of us in the present. And here's what's strange. It's that Hollywood has never had more power to do this than they can today. Like, they have all this power. They can build ancient Rome right down to the armor, the rivets, their road system. They can use thousands of digital soldiers or thousands of real extras in a way that a filmmaker 50 years or more ago would never have imagined possible. And the sad thing is, even with all that power at their disposal, the past in these films has never felt less convincing than it does right now. Modern historical films, they can try to nail the architecture, although sometimes they don't pay any attention to that either. They can try to nail the costumes. They don't pay that much attention to that either a lot of times. Same thing with the weapons. And they completely miss the authenticity of what engrosses you into a film, the things that gave those items, those things that you're looking at, meaning. Characters standing in front of an ancient place, thinking and joking and arguing exactly like people from the present day Los Angeles, like we got a little bit of in the Odyssey, like movies are prone to do now. That is not realistic. That's not what pulls you into a movie. That's just whatever their worldview is. And I started thinking about this as Halloween and spooky season is approaching, because every year, of course, around this time, we would sit down and watch, horror movies that came on. Those were always they had commercials that were on every night about the next scary film that was going to show. But there were other times of the year that took you to other places, not just scary places, but I think about Easter growing up, and every year for some reason, and they still do this, they will air the 10 Commandments. And a lot of times, really the one that's more confusing is they would add the weird Wizard of Oz to it. They would air that right along with it. And there you would go. That was a tradition. Every Easter weekend, you were going to spend a big sprawling 3.5+ hours with Charlton Heston in this epic that was stated at the beginning. It was trying to give reverence to the Bible, to the source material. And then you had Wizard of Oz, which was this grand spectacle fantasy world that was also came back and grounded in reality. And every weekend at that time, my mom and dad would go and get bucket of KFC and all the fixings, and we would make like a pallet, like a picnic on the floor, and watch those movies. And I would sit there in front of it watching Moses. I forgot that he was Charlton Heston. That's the point. I was a little kid. I watched Moses part the Red Sea. I watched the golden calf get destroyed. I watched the 10 Commandments rain down and be broken into pieces. I watched Dorothy go into Oz in Technicolor in those ruby red slippers bring her home while there was a bucket of chicken sitting between us. That was the whole night, and I loved every second of it. I didn't think about ancient Egypt at the time, and is this correct or is that correct, or politics or history, but I understood Moses. I understood a man being asked to carry the weight of something heavier than anything he could possibly imagine. And I understood a world that had its own laws, God, the whole stakes of it all. And somehow, even when I was just a little kid on that blanket, that felt completely real to me. And that is what Hollywood is missing. I don't think they can make me feel that way anymore. And we are going to talk about why. Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, there's problems with this or problems with that, and Gladiator wasn't this, and Gladiator, and this is not. I'm not arguing for documentary level accuracy. I'm not arguing for that. Movies have always bent facts for the narrative, but they try to keep the story. Braveheart isn't a real history lesson. Gladiator definitely plays fast and loose with some things in Rome, and we forgive them when the film captures the emotional spirit of what is true about it and the world that is showing us. And that is a real problem right now with Hollywood. Hollywood has stopped being comfortable with letting the past speak in its own voice, so to speak. That might sound harmless, but it isn't, because instead of walking into an old story humbly and asking, what did these people value? What did these people do at this time? What did they fear? What did they hold up as glorious? What did they aspire to be? What did they understood they may or may not be? The question is always now, how do we update this? How do we subvert this? How do we make it for modern audiences? It's very different. That is not harmless at all. There's a massive difference between making an old story more accessible and understanding and replacing it with a new meaning all of its own. So one is a translation. One is in the spirit of the other. The other one is a perceived correction of the past, which you can't do. So think about a story like The Odyssey or Robin Hood or Dracula, or one of my favorite underrated movies and a great book is The Count of Monte Cristo. And think about how that has actually survived. Empires, literally empires, have risen and vanished. Borders redrawn. Entire civilizations risen and then gone from Earth, and people kept telling those stories during that time anyway. They persisted for centuries, and in some cases, just thousands of years. With The Odyssey, almost 3,000 years. The average streaming show that you watch now is forgotten before the algorithm finishes recommending the thing. These stories outlasted nations and civilizations. That does not happen by accident. It happens because somewhere underneath the setting, there's something true about being a human that people keep recognizing again and again, generation after generation. Pride still destroys people. Pride destroys. It comes before the fall. Grief still changes you. That's what's like great stories. They let us discover that about ourselves, that human beings change far less than the world does around them, which makes the current moment so strange because all these things are still there. Every studio acts like they're not. They complain they can't find dependable stories, and the largest library ever tested, proven material in human history is sitting right in front of them. I say that as a former history teacher. Mythology, scripture, legend, centuries of stories have survived the ultimate test screening. But Homer already ran the numbers back in the day. Shakespeare has the data, and somehow we still can't manage to tell these stories honestly, because when we do, everything has to be a metaphor about what's wrong, a metaphor for grief, suffering, toxic this and that, all of the things for a modern message and audience. And listen, I've always loved movies set in a different time because of what they give us things that a modern story can't. And I love that. They give us a way to step outside of our world, our assumptions in our own age and time for a couple of hours. They give us a reminder that the way we live now isn't the only way that people have ever lived. And that just because we're living that way now doesn't mean we are right in everything that we do, that our version of progress is not beyond criticism. It is not beyond reproach, and it's not universally agreed to. We're not the first generation to think that we have it all figured out. I promise you. And that's what the 10 Commandments gave me as a kid on a blanket with a chicken leg in my hand and some mashed potatoes over here. Not a history lesson, not homework to take home, but a world where things mattered enough to live and, more importantly, to die for. So let me show you exactly what I mean with a film I actually love. Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is a mouthful to say. Visually, that movie is a masterpiece. There's no doubt about it. More imagination in one scene in that movie than most modern blockbusters have crammed into 2 hours of runtime. Gary Oldman is like seductive and horrifying, and sometimes he does both at the same time, which is Dracula, right? And I would rather watch him take these big swings and a director take big swings like that than sit through another sterile focus group, a message proved, box checking, whatever it is, with some kind of agenda at its moral center telling you exactly what is and isn't right for you to think and do and believe. In the novel, Dracula, though, he's not a misunderstood romantic searching centuries for his lost love. He is a predator, legit predator. He corrupts and consumes people like objects. The book doesn't want you to fall in love with him like the movies do, really. The book wants you to understand the horror of becoming like him. So Coppola's film turns him into a tragic romantic figure instead, which has been done a lot. And that creates compelling cinema. Oldman is so good, it really kind of almost overwhelms you wanting to object to it. But it does change the story. Evil that has to be explained by heartbreak is evil that is being partly excused. And that sort of opened the door for our whole gray area, moral gray area that really isn't. The moral gray area always leans bad. Every hero's got to be deconstructed. And look what happens going down that road with Lucy because of it. In the film, she plays a provocative and playful character. And when Dracula corrupts her, it plays almost like an extension of who she already was. But in the novel, that's completely different because Lucy is a very kind of like warm and generous, very much loved and liked person in the novel. And Dracula doesn't just kill her. He takes something innocent that she was and twists it into some kind of demonic, grotesque copy of itself. And then the greater her virtue, the greater the violation is of what Dracula did to her. And that's what the novel is trying to tell you. Strip the virtue out, and you've made the tragedy of what happens to her so much smaller. And you kind of excuse, again, the main predator, villain of this story. And that tells you a little bit about modern storytelling right there. We've gotten very, very good at writing corruption, betrayal, cynicism, manipulation, and downright evil. And when we know the language, because we live in that language in our society, it is reflected back at us. We've almost lost the ability to write a person, though, who has goodness, and it isn't secretly a mask hiding something else to be deconstructed. So it's almost like we don't know how to adapt that novel directly anymore because we can't perceive anyone being genuinely good without it just being their second face that they're using to hide who they really are. But older stories understood the exact opposite of that. Virtue and being a good person never removes conflict. That's always, you hear that so much. Oh, you're a person of faith. How do you do this? Or how do you do that? Because nobody is perfect. Right? Nobody is perfect. So removing the deconstructing doesn't leave you with a perfect person. It just leaves you with an actual human being. And that kind of creates a whole other thing that is existing in movies now that didn't exist so much in movies before, because doing the right thing in a movie now is hard. precisely when the fear and temptation offers an easier road. And we see that so much, like in the film Hereditary. I say this all the time. There's no good to counterbalance the evil. There's no good to counterbalance the bad. It's just an ending, grief-filled death march to the end just to see how bad it gets. And they kind of take out the good that balances out that. So you take out the conflict and you just stew in this bad spot, because they don't understand that a good, brave person isn't someone who's perfect or someone without fear. A brave person is someone who feels fear and moves on something anyway. And then now, none of this makes, I'm going to just, if you're getting mad because you're a big fan of Bram Stoker's Dracula by Coppola, don't be. I like the film. I love the film. I own the film on 4K. It's a good movie. It's like a fascinating, feverish nightmare of Gothic filmmaking, and it's all a lot of practical done in camera, and I love it. But it is a perfect example of how an adaptation can keep every famous piece of a story, the castle, the blood, the names, but still quietly change what the actual story believes and what it was trying to say. So you compare that to a film like The Count of Monte Cristo from 2002, where it changes things but still gets almost everything right. That movie takes enormous liberties with the novel. There is no doubt that it is not sticking word for word to the novel. Again, I'm not looking for a documentary. It definitely simplifies the plot. It changes major relationships in here. Edmond Dantes and Ferdinand, it gives them a friendship before the betrayal that barely exists in the book. It builds that up for the drama of it. And on paper, it should feel like a betrayal to the source material in that regard, yet it feels exactly like The Count of Monte Cristo, because the filmmakers understood that the emotional foundation underneath this movie with all that plot, they really got what it was. That is that Edmond Dantes begins as a good man overall, just a solid good man, a trusting man too. And that the betrayal doesn't just take away his freedom, it takes away his ability to trust the world, anyone in it, really. Prison doesn't just change his circumstances, it changes completely who he is. And the film gives you a pure wish fulfillment fantasy after that. Because the film gives you a forgotten prisoner who returns wealthy, trained, dangerous, unrecognizable, but it never pretends that the revenge is a clean form of healing. It warns you about it, in fact. And because of that, that sets it very much apart from a lot of other movies in modern day storytelling. Because the treasure gives Edmund power. It gives him power, but it does not give him peace at all. That's why it matters so much to the story to show that. And it also matters why his mentor is there, because he's not just teaching him swordsmanship, but trying to keep hatred from finishing the job that the betrayal and prison started on him as a person. That is fidelity of a much deeper kind. Not did they keep every page like a documentary? It's did they understand why the story mattered in the first place? So the 2002 film, it's not embarrassed by Edmund's virtues at all. It's not embarrassed by the fact he's a good man. He loves, his love matters, his faith matters, even like when he's wounded, it matters. When his faith is wounded, it matters. Loyalty and mercy matter. And the film never steps outside the story to apologize for it, apologize or wink at the camera for taking this seriously. That's the difference. Not whether an adaptation changes things, it's inevitably going to. It's whether it still believes in the source material that it's changing. The truth is, I still think about the blanket on the floor sometimes, parting the Red Sea, the ruby slippers, horror movies around Halloween and spooky season, a bucket of chicken between two parents who didn't have much that year, so that was a big deal, but always found a way to make these movies like an event. It didn't need the 10 Commandments, not really. And I sure didn't need the 10 Commandments to be exactly historically correct. I needed to have a movie that believed in itself and the source material and what it was trying to say so much that it made me believe in it. To trust that Moses and God and trust in his impossible choice and understand that it all actually mattered. And it did. That's what being a kid on a blanket felt like. It felt like I had traveled somewhere else. And it led to me making movies and being a history teacher. That is real power. That's all I'm really asking modern Hollywood for. Not obedience to every page of every book. Coppola changed Dracula's moral center and made him something worth watching. It made a hell of a movie out of it. The Count of Monte Cristo changed nearly everything in a lot of ways and still felt completely faithful to the source material. The films that fell aren't the ones that change things. It's the reason they change things and what they change. The ones that fail are the ones that stop believing in what they're changing, or they're changing things for the wrong reasons. They're either too embarrassed by honor, faith, virtue, or anything like that that could go contrary to any modern day takes on stuff. They can't do it. So they take those things out. They can't let them exist. And if they do exist, they can't let them breathe. No, you don't need to have every detail right. You absolutely don't. You need to still believe that your story is worth telling straight. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Are you tired of the moral gray areas? Are you tired of not being able to tell a story and be faithful to the material, what it's trying to say? That there is good out there, that there are heroes out there, that there are people who will sacrifice and live the right way without winking to the camera and shaming them for who they are or what they believe? Do you just want good movies and good stories again like I do? Drop it in the comments. Let me know the first movie that showed you the world in a whole different way from your own that you still remember, and which one made you believe completely. I told you about some of mine. Now let me hear some of yours. And that's what I got for you this time. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, hype up the video. So much more coming here. If you want to help support what we're doing a little bit more, my Patreon link is in the description. You'll get your name on every video, special members only videos, and so much more. And it all helps the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.